You know, Midnight, I've been thinking recently that it's been a while since I've had a truly horrifying experience. Recently I got scared because my forehead is still getting over beating the door head on, but I want something that will really grasp me and be longer than 5 seconds and end with me being knocked out on the floor. Listen, I said something horrifying, not something that would give me a heart attack. Oh yeah, that would probably be a better idea.
You know, besides being painfully average at games, I've always been, well, just really shit at survival horror games. Prey 2017, your Resident Evils, Amnesia, Dead Space, Alien Isolation, all games that I've been able to beat, sure, but it usually takes a time or two. For whatever reason, I always mess up my calculations on just how much stuff I need to be saving versus using. I don't know, the whole thought of going through a whole game without using a special weapon or ability just can never sit right with me. But then I also get upset when I run out of ammo or get stuck because I overlook something. So obviously I'm 100% factually sound in my logic. I don't know why I'm like that with these games, but that's always the story whenever I pick one up to play. Maybe it's because this genre of game just really intrigues me. Most daywalkers out there, when they think video games, they think of something like Mario Kart, or a bunch of burly white guys imposing freedoms on minorities. But I've always felt that horror genre is the most perfect genre for video games. No other media is as engaging, and because of that, they can truly be more terrifying than anything else if done right. This is something that I've always felt super strongly about, but there is one horror series that I haven't been able to experience.
Do you think they know? Silent Hill, one of Konami's most acclaimed franchises. The first 3 or 4 games, depending upon who you ask, are slated as masterpieces in the video game industry, but I personally haven't gotten to experience them, and I think I'm going to change that today. Well, let's just check eBay to see what a copy of Silent Hill is going for. I didn't realize they were going for this much! How much money we got in the budget? And now we wait. You know, I really wish I had something to do while I waited. Anything. Finally. Finally, I actually get to do something. Huh.
Okay, let me preference this before we start. If you're lucky enough to grab this on the PS3 store before Sony shuts it down, it's probably your best bet of playing this game. I'm guessing Sony's socks are done drying. I know my PC does wonders for me, so I can only imagine what their server computers are doing there. I paid $150 for my copy, and that was on the low end of the spectrum. I don't agree with illegal emulation by a long shot, but things like this almost make me want to add sinning to my schedule. And speaking of sinning, let's talk about Konami. Yeah, remember these guys? Before they threw all their IPs in the trash can and ditched all credibility for pachinko machines and NFTs, they actually had a lot going for them. They started out earlier on the NES with some really well-known titles like Contra, Metal Gear, and Castlevania. But when the PS1 came along, Konami and every other third-party developer was jumping at Sony's feet and praising them for the invention of disc-based media that had been around a little bit before that thanks to PC gaming. Yeah, PC versus consoles isn't a new thing. That's been going on since the Commodore days. You see, Nintendo may have had Konami and other developers like Capcom on their side during the days of the Super Nintendo, but they lost a lot of their market shares to the Sega Genesis, and Nintendo wanted them back in the next round of generation consoles. So, they partnered with Sony to make a disc-based console add-on for their current console they were in development for, the N64. That whole team-up though went really south when someone in a suit somewhere decided they weren't getting enough money from it. So Sony decided that they wanted to take those ideas and make a runaway success out of it. See, the PlayStation used discs instead of cartridges for their games, and boy howdy did those discs have a lot more storage than the cartridges. The N64s may have been more secure and harder to pirate, and I mean, you could throw them at your sibling when they beat you in Mario Kart, but developers wanted to make huge stories at this time. Gaming was getting so much bigger than what it had been in the past, and a lot of companies wanted to go much bigger with the media. And now they could do it because of disc-based media. So like I said, a lot of these third-party developers fell at Sony's feet to jump into the PlayStation's welcoming arms, i.e. Square Enix with Final Fantasy VII, Capcom with Resident Evil, and Konami with Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Metal Gear Solid, and Silent Hill.
You see,
Konami really wanted to get successful over here in the States, and they felt the best way to do that was to get a team together that had failed at everything they had worked on previously with the company. I mean, I asked to be transferred with my friends when I laundered money from C2T Studios, so we got all of our subpoenas delivered together. This team was branded Team Silent. Not the most creative of names, but it works. To be fair though, I have heard worse. I'm looking over at you, Intelligent Systems. Anyways, back to Konami. They have a reputation for being... how do I say this? Overly managerial? They basically abuse their workers. Eventually, Team Silent had had enough of that garbage and decided to hell with Konami. Let's make a game that we want to. We're gonna get fired anyways. And to be fair, everyone in Team Silent was planning on leaving Konami for other jobs, so they didn't have much of anything to lose. Silent Hill was released on February 23rd, 1999, and to say the least, it was a critical, commercial, and cult hit. It's pretty rare for a form of art to hit all three of those, and trust me, Konami noticed this. They realized, hey, maybe if we give our team some creative control rather than churning something out that no one likes and our employees hate to make, everyone would be happier for it. And then they said, tell that Kojima guy that his project is greenlit.
But anyways, let's jump into the game now. You're a cat. All you do is sleep.
Silent Hill is a 3D survival horror game set in the vacation town of Silent Hill. We play as Harry Mason, a man who lost consciousness in an accident due to avoiding a little girl on top of a bridge. Upon waking up, he finds that his daughter Cheryl is missing, and he has to trudge his way through a lot of spooky cult stuff, subliminal messaging, and visits to a place known as the Otherworld to find his daughter and escape the town of Silent Hill. The story of Silent Hill kinda leans hard on the whole cult nonsense, something they would fix in a later game, so I'm told, and then come back to it like a dust bunny that never really gets vacuumed up. Resident Evil has had the same problem over the years with the Umbrella Corporation. Here in Silent Hill 1, it's fine, they had to set the scene somehow, so it's a pretty good way to start it out. Throughout the game, Harry runs into the head cultist Dahlia Gillespie a lot, and you just know that spray painted all over her is she's the villain. It's so painfully obvious, and this doormat just goes along with it.
Wait, don't go yet.
I found out that I was not really so much invested with the cult stuff as much as I was our main character. Harry's just such a determined man trying to find his daughter that I really felt compelled to see how his story ends. He really is a perfect surrogate for the player to discover the mysterious town of Silent Hill. He's just a normal guy that gets thrown into a random cult ritual. You know, as you do. Harry, Cheryl, and Dahlia are not the only characters in the game though. We also have Dr. Kaufman, the nurse Lisa Garland, and the police officer Sybil Bennett. All these characters are pretty good. Kaufman and Lisa are definitely the more interesting characters, as everything you learn about them is in optional notes and a VHS tape that you find lying around. This is such a great means of storytelling in my opinion. You definitely can get all the necessary information needed from just the cutscenes and the main plot, but this adds a lot of depth to that story. Things like this also feel way more rewarding, as receiving something extra for your curiosity makes you way more invested in discovering more about what is going on in this town. Games like Amnesia are great, but discovering the story there can feel like a chore and subsequently not nearly as rewarding, because if you miss one thing, you could be missing some vital information about the plot, and that can really feel frustrating when that occurs. Now, with you wanting to explore everything to find out more about the story, you not only will get rewarded with extra story bits and alternate story endings depending upon how much you explore, but the game will also reward you with extra health and ammo. Holy shit! Merging the story and gameplay mechanics together? Who would have thought? Yeah, I suppose it's best time let's talk about the gameplay. Harry controls like a tank, so you know what that means. To turn Harry left or right is gonna take as long as an update for an Xbox 360. Luckily, turning around can be nice and quick thanks to pressing L1 and R1 at the same time, but I hardly use that. Sometimes without knowing, I think that I secretly, unknowingly make the game harder for myself. Or I'm just stupid. I don't know. I guess I just forgot it was there. Definitely is helpful, I just forgot you could use it. You can center the camera with R2, the circle button toggles your flashlight, triangle opens the map, select opens up your inventory, and if you hold down square, Harry will run until your heart's content. Something that I think was a nice touch is that he'll run out of breath after a while. You didn't really see that much during the PS1 era. Honestly, you were lucky if you got anything besides just Lego people walking around. The R2 button readies Harry's weapon that you equipped, and then you use the X button to make him attack. Harry's got melee and range weapons. The melee weapons can take some serious getting used to. Most of them are on a delay or have such a short range that you better be ready to take some hits. Range weapons were definitely my best friend, but ammo is scarce. It's like it's a survival game or something like that. But the game does do a good job at making you weigh how many medkits you have versus ammunition for your guns. Because when you engage in a fight with a melee weapon, you're bound to take at least one hit. Now, I played through this game twice, and I can say that the ammo really dries up in the second half of the game. Harry had more ammo stuffed in his pants than I have paper on National Paper Day, and I still found myself running low near the end of the game. I've noticed a lot of survival horror games do this. A lot of these games will simply run out of pickups right at the 3/4 mark. Prey 2017, The Evil Within, and basically every Resident Evil game, I am never able to find hardly any pickups in the last quarter of the game. But maybe it's just because I'm shit at games. I mean, look at me, I own the entire world's paper stock. Do I look like someone who'd be good at games? Where was I? Oh yeah, ammo in the pants. Most of the time I found myself using my pistol when I needed to use a gun and saving the rest for boss fights. There's tons of ammo lying around for the pistol, but there's not nearly as much for the other guns. So saving them for those boss fights is definitely the wisest call to do because they do the most damage. In general, the fights in this game really are not that great. Fighting can be downright annoying, but that's part of the charm of a horror game, right? I guess another thing that gives the combat a pass is that Harry's just a normal dude. He's not a special ops top of his class soldier, so it adds the credibility of the combat just being, well, shit. One thing that did catch my attention is how the monsters you fight throughout the town will realize when you're kicking the crap out of them and they'll just end up running away.
Why don't more games do this? I mean, I've seen tons of games where you can run away from monsters. That's the bed and breakfast of horror games. I guess it's because the publishers think that wouldn't be scary, but just because you kill monster after monster, that doesn't make it scary. Them running away means that they'll come back if you run into them again. So I always made sure to keep my ammo and med packs close to the chest, if you catch my drift.
All the monsters are fine, nothing really to write home about. The second game is where the creatures of Silent Hill really get iconic. After I finished the game twice, I decided to think about all the monsters in the game I'd found actually scary, and really the only ones I found memorable were the kids in the school. Sure, the others might be more iconic, but the kids were the only ones that made me jump back in my seat when I first saw them. No, the monsters themselves really aren't that scary. The game's atmosphere is where that really comes into play, but put a pin in that because I'll be coming back to that. Back to the gameplay for now. So, when we're not busy beating kids and grotesque pterodactyl-like things, the game's downtime is taken up by puzzles. Most of the time this involves unlocking a certain weird-looking door with a certain weird-looking key that would be everything that the human mind can't imagine except just a normal lock key. Sometimes it can be finding something that points you in the direction that you need to go if your path is blocked, and others are connected to the game's iconic Otherworld. These puzzles are typically when you're exploring many of the buildings throughout the town. Some rooms will open, others won't. And then, in the Otherworld, some other rooms will close and some other rooms will open up. It adds a nice way to keep one on their toes, as I found myself constantly having to remap out the buildings in my mind of where I need to go. But because it's a puzzle game, inside of these buildings there's some classic what the f***s. You can't have a puzzle game without some what the f***s. One of these required me to have knowledge of fucking zodiac signs prior to playing it. I mean, it's fine because I can just look up whatever I need to know because #pleb status, but back in the day, before the internet was a standardized resource, I doubt I would have finished this game. To any of my older correspondents out there, if you finished this game with just your previous zodiac knowledge and not having to look it up, good on you. Please let me know when I can come to your zodiac lectures at the colleges. To the game's credit, that was the only puzzle that really gave me an issue. I mean, other than having to know fucking astrology, the puzzles were a nice meaty challenge for the most part. Like I said, most of them required me to find an assortment of weirdly shaped keys to open a set of weirdly shaped doors. Most of them made sense, but some of them could be really cryptically annoying at times. But after my brain decided to wake up, have its cup of coffee, take its shower, go to work, come back, relax, eat dinner, and then decided it wanted to figure out what the puzzle was, I was able to solve them. Although looking back, I never really definitively figured out how to open up the piano in the schoolhouse. I just cleared every single room until it opened. I always thought it was something to do with those shadow kids running around in the school.
Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but I just really like the thought of the enemies, atmosphere, and puzzles all coming together to make this wonderful video game cocktail.
Now, mini horror games are great, but not because of the gameplay and definitely not because of the voice acting.
Everyone will die.
So what am I supposed to do? I've got to save Cheryl.
No, these games are all about two things, being scary and the atmosphere. Obviously these need to go hand in hand, and I'm sure that back in the day it was a truly terrifying experience, but like most PS1 games, it kinda maybe hasn't aged super well. The pre-rendered cutscenes and moments when you're in the heat of gameplay still look pretty good, but the in-game cutscenes, those look really rough. I think it's because we zoom in so close to the character models, and most of the games from this era can be summed up as the mini adventures of pixelated Lego people in a pre-rendered Playmobil setting. But besides all of that, I was still pulled into the game. Like I said, Harry's just so determined that you really want to see him find his daughter, and having a compelling main character is enough for me to stay invested. No, the story wasn't all that scary to me. The moment-to-moment gameplay is what really terrified me. The atmosphere really packs a punch in this game. The field of view in this game is widely short because of all the fog, which is why I think that they were able to get it to run at 60 frames most of the time. Now, when we went over to the other world, for some reason I had issues with the frame rate, but when I was in the main town, or not in the other world, it was fine. It was really weird though, because with all the rendering effects and fog, I would have assumed it was the other way around. Now, running randomly into the monsters because of the fog could pose a problem, but that's where the radio comes into play. The radio has to be one of the coolest and most brilliant mechanics in a horror game ever. The radio signals you with the most ominous sound created by human minds. Static. You could be walking around just minding your own business when all of a sudden that damn radio static starts up and you can't see anything because of all this fog is in the way, and you can't move around because of the stupid tank controls, and you just need to get to the hospital to advance the story, but then you get shanked by whatever comes crawling around in the shadows. That is where the game is truly scary. The fixed camera angles don't do you any favors in this regard, but that's part of the uncomfortable feeling horror games have to give, right? So many times I find myself walking into a room, hearing that static, and then freaking out, not being able to fight the monster in the room because I was too busy trying to make the camera as happy as a man trying to make a gold digger happy on the first date.
Or any date for that matter.
This kind of sporadic horror moments are really what carries the game. They never really linger on the scares either. When the game transitions into the other world, that's usually when the monsters come out. Some are definitely around in the town when it's just fogged up like it's a lake at 3 AM with no lighthouse light working. The other world holds the rest of them. Most games in this day and age put a spotlight on those creatures and say, ooh, look at me, I'm scary. But Silent Hill doesn't do that. It's very refreshing. Silent Hill knows that the experience of being terrifying comes from the lack of control and sight in the situation that the player is stuck in. And man, it's effective. On top of having to re-coordinate how you walk through the building that you're stuck in, like a blind person shuffling around his house where the furniture got changed overnight, you have this highly anxious sound blaring for something that you can't see in the room because you're too busy shuffling the camera. This is where the game really shines, and quite frankly, I feel like the price of the game was worth every penny for someone as crazy as me who has to have the physical copies.
As I said though, if you can get a hold of this thing before the PS3 network shuts down, it's probably going to be the best way that you can experience the game outside of breaking your wallet or just going to jail for being illegal. It's a fantastic way to experience some great atmosphere and quality scares, especially if you're into Lego pixelated horror.
Later.
Oh, and now that that is done, I think I want to move on to something truly terrifying. What's next? I can't do it.